So it's a couple minutes after here. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Tell you a little bit about Eric. He was born and raised in the Allentown area. Went to law school at William and Mary, and currently lives in Vienna, Virginia. I don't know if you're a member of the Virginia Postal History Society or Pennsylvania, but certainly open for that. I'm a member of both, and we'd love to have you on both of them because we'd love to include this kind of stuff, not just postal history, but everything that's associated with it. And he has his wife, Michelle, and two college-age sons, works for the Department of Energy, and his hobbies include philately, of course, and the Great Allentown Fair, marathon running, that's the one I can't understand, and travel. And he's a proud member of the Lehigh County Agricultural Society, as you're saying there. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Eric, and your screen is already shared. You can jump in when you like. And if we would maybe save the questions to the end, and Eric will be able to discuss anything with you guys at the end, that'd be great. This is being recorded, so I will have it for our website at the paphs.org and also our YouTube channel to go back and if anybody wants to see it again. Thanks very much, Eric.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight and to share my two hobbies with you, philately and the Great Allentown Fair. It's really an honor to speak with you all. As Steve said, I grew up in the Allentown area of Pennsylvania, and that's where my stamp collecting hobby started about age 7, probably similar to many of you. And I started out with general issue US stamps, but for the past 20 years or so, I've really focused on the area of US possessions. So almost 25 years later, once I was living outside of Washington, D.C., that's when I started my second hobby, anything and everything related to the Allentown Fair. And this started back in the days when eBay was a new thing. So I was introduced to this, and you can imagine me sitting with a 3-week-old baby and trying to use eBay and have a baby squirming and carrying on. But that's how it all started. So I always remember how long I've been collecting the Allentown Fair, because it was when Alex was 3 weeks old, and now he's about to graduate from college. But so with that aside, as this presentation hopefully demonstrates, there's really a substantial area of intersection between the two hobbies. A lot of great postal history items, but oh so much more. So this cover slide will start you off. This is what I would say is the best item in my whole collection. It's obviously a poster from the fair in 1914. And it's just one of my favorites. So let me set the stage with a brief bit of history for you all. The Great Allentown Fair is sponsored each year by the Lehigh County Agricultural Society, LCAS for short, and it's one of the oldest ongoing fairs in the nation, if not the oldest. The society was started in January 24th, 1852 in Egypt, PA, which is very close to Allentown. And a couple weeks later, or a week or so later, they adopted a constitution. And what you see here, this is a kind of a locket of sorts, and it's an actual painting, probably from the 1830s. And this is Edward D. Lysenring. And he was one of the fair's original founders, or one of the society's original founders, and the first LCAS librarian. So, and what's really kind of interesting, if you saw this flipped over, there's an even tinier photo, and it's his daughter. He got this, or gave this to his daughter, and she loved it so much she put her own picture in as well. So the LCAS's mission, it's what the bylaws state here. It's the objective of the society is and remains improvement of and advancement of agriculture, horticulture, livestock, domestic and mechanical arts, and the entertainment of its members and patrons. And what we have here, this is a little pin, or it looks like a tie tack, but really a pin which has one of the seals or logos of the Lehigh County Agricultural Society. So the early days of the fair, the first fair was in 1852, October 6 to 8, and it was quite a big success. And nothing breeds success like success. So the fair kept going and growing, and by 1889, they had to move to a new location, a larger fairgrounds, which had more amenities, a half-mile track, a grove of trees, a bandstand, fountains. They added on to the land. It was kind of on the outskirts of the downtown area of Allentown. Now it's well within the city, but they added 11 more acres to get to the 51 they have today. And the name of the event, it used to be the Lehigh County Fair, but by around 1900, you started to see it switching over to the Great Allentown Fair, because Allentown was Lehigh County's county seat, and it just had probably better name recognition. Let's see, it was incorporated as a stock company in 1855, but wasn't, to this day, it's not for any profits. Any kind of proceeds get invested right back into the society and its mission. All the directors and officers always forego any kind of fees they're due as officers. So it's really quite an altruistic organization. And so here you see another one of the Agricultural Society's logos. This one is on many of the memorabilia items. And this one that you're seeing here, this is the only thing you're going to see tonight that's not in my own collection. This one is actually belongs to the Agricultural Society and was present at one of the fairs. So let's see, as mentioned, this is a stock company. So this is an example of one of the very early LCAS shares of stock. This one was from 1859, and it only had a $10 par value. It was increased to $25 a few years later. And for most of the society's existence, any one person could only own a single share. But in recent years, maybe in the last 20 years or so, now you can own 2 shares. And sometimes they're sold. I was lucky enough to be able to purchase one, but usually they're passed down from generation to generation. And this particular one, as it says here, it was transferred a few times, and there's a circa 1910 red revenue stamp on the back. I can't picture it because it's all sealed up inside a frame, but this is one of the originals. And so my share is number 1256, but mine, I said, is a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. It's a very fuzzy version of this original. So what you're seeing here is the true kind of original beauty. So as I said, the fair has been held pretty much every year since 1852, with just 4 exceptions. 1862, due to the Civil War, I guess there were some Union troops gathered there. 1917 and 18, that's when the camp was turned over to the U.S. Army Ambulance Corps as Camp Crane, to get troops ready to send over to the front in Europe, especially France during World War I. And then finally, just last year, the coronavirus knocked us out after 100 straight years or more. But luckily, 2021, things were back in operation, so everybody was quite happy with that. Oh, and here, what you see depicted here, this is one of the diplomas. This is a kind of a type of award that the society would present for somebody that did a display or some kind of a presentation at one of the fair gatherings. And this one is from 1859 as well. And so it was only the 7th year of the fair. So here are some of the types of postal history that you'd find associated with the Allentown Fair. covers and letterhead put out by the society itself. Third parties would advertise their businesses and also mention the fair to grab attention. There were souvenir postcards, other businesses advertising postcards, which maybe they sent out beforehand or distributed at the fair. And there were some Cinderellas and poster stamps for a period of time. And then I have a section of postal history specific to Camp Crane. So originally this presentation, when I started making it, had 111 slides, and it was quite logical, in chronological order based on the type of material. But not surprisingly, I came to see that was going to be way too much for a 1-hour presentation. So I had to cut it down and reorganize it with some philatelic and non-philatelic examples. And I decided to try to organize it around what are the steps necessary to hold a successful fair like the Great Allentown Fair. And then there will also be some slides at the end, again, to give you a sense of what was happening at Camp Crane during the years 1917 to 18. And I'm pleased to note that Steve is actually going to be posting on the website for you all the more complete set of slides. So that way you'll get to see a bunch of other, covers and other items that didn't make the cut in the 1 hour. So launching a successful annual fair requires a lot of preparation and hard work on the part of the Lehigh County Agricultural Society. So they need to send out a whole bunch of letters to get things organized. And those letters also serve an advertising purpose. So here you can see on the left-hand pair of covers, these are from circa 1898. Who they're to or from is not kind of that, not important or noteworthy, but it's interesting to see, the designs of things and the kind of history and chronology. And then 1899, I like this set. This was, I think, the oldest that I have that, is a matched pair with the cover and the letterhead. Let's see. Oh, and just so this letter from 1899, it was to confirm the service of a judge at the fair. So keep that in mind for a second. So here are the types of badges that judges at the fair would wear. And as you'll note in on the top photo on the left, there is one from 1899. So, the judges, you needed a legion of dedicated judges each year to assess all the entries across all the categories, many, many categories listed in the annual premium list. And back then they would, they wanted people to know who the judges are when they were performing their official duties. So here you see a run of badges from 1899 through 1914. And I also have some all the way through 1919, so a good 20-year run there. And these are pretty rare. Okay, and here are some examples of the letterhead that the LCAS would send out for correspondence. In the old days, the letterhead changed from year to year. And again, keep in mind, that important advertising function. And over time, it compared to the 1899, when you can see it's becoming a little progressively more elaborate. So here are the letterheads from 1913, 14, 17, and 19. And if you were paying attention, the unusual one is 1917. It's like, well, the fair was canceled that year. Well, waste not, want not back in those days and up in that area. So they used that letterhead to announce plans for the next fair, which was going to be held in 1919 once the Camp Crane was closed and the Agricultural Society got the fairgrounds back for its use. Okay, so here's another example of letterhead and matching cover. This is from 19 for this 1916 fair. It was put out 1917, so it wasn't leading up to that fair, but used again after the fair. And again, 1917's fair did not happen. Okay, so posters, that was another important early form of advertising for the Great Allentown Fair. You know, they were trying to get the word out wherever they could and get as many people to attend as possible. So these were just posted up anywhere, train stations, sides of buildings or shop fronts. I've even seen them nailed to a tree because I've seen that confirmed in postcards. So, and back in the earlier days, like I have one from 1901, it was just some simple red block letters on a white background. But over time, they became more and more elaborate. So here's one depicted with from 1920, and then this other one to the right is the Barnum and Bailey Circus, which also no longer exists, but this one's probably from about 1980. And then, of course, there was our original cover slide with the 1914 poster that would have saved the same purpose. And unfortunately, only a pretty small number of these posters survived because, you know, they're pretty fragile, you know, bulky, and back in the day, there was this instinct to just throw things out up there. So, you know, thank God for the sentimental types or the pack rats that make this hobby possible. So now large mailers, they not only advertised the fair, but they also transmitted important information about the event, such as the premium lists. So here are a couple examples of those large format covers. The one at the top was for the 1923 fair. It was obviously used in-house for other purposes. This one didn't go out, but you know, it just, you know, shows you some of the interesting things you would have to look forward to. Here they, you know, not only talk about the horse races, but there was even going to be fireworks. And I said that hasn't really been an annual tradition, but certainly was in 1923. In 1939, they shamelessly piggybacked on the New York World's Fair. So they said, well, if you're going to the New York World's Fair, you better stop on the way back and come enjoy the Allentown Fair. Okay, so as mentioned on the last slide, premium lists. So the premium lists encompass the comprehensive rules and regulations of the fair. It talks about governing officials, categories for entry, the prizes, and any other kind of detail that you want to know about that year's fair. The cover artwork became increasingly more elaborate and beautiful over time. And here are a couple examples. The one on the left, 1875, that is my oldest premium list. And then the other one is 1893, getting a little more detailed. And then here are three more premium lists to show you from 1897, 1902, and 1903. And you'll just notice the beautiful artwork. And you can also see from 1897, it was called, that was when it was the Lehigh County Fair. But by 1902 or 1901, it's shifting to Allentown Fair. And the one at the top right, that's a souvenir booklet, but I thought it looked so nice. I just wanted to show you the beautiful artwork on that one, even if it's not a premium list. And three more examples of premium lists from 1909, 1910, 1913, you know, just to show you the beautiful covers. And again, very hard to find. Most of these things I've only seen once in 20 years. All right, so local businesses were also a source of advertising for the Great Allentown Fair. And here you see an advertising cover for the Grand Central Hotel in Allentown, long since demolished. from 1893. And then they have the advertisement for that year's fair. Okay, and this is a particularly beautiful advertising cover for the 50th fair, for the semi-centennial fair, as they called it, in 1901. It's put out, well, obviously some vendor prepared these for greater distribution, and then this Kroll Fur Company, they bought some, stamped their name on it, and sent it out. And on the reverse, you can see some of the events you had to look forward to. And there's quite a lot of souvenirs from the 1901 fair, because the 50th anniversary, they really wanted to make it a blowout. So a lot of souvenirs, a lot more documentation of things than the years before or the years right after. But the thing that was the big draw, obviously, was this great match race between Prince Alert and Little Boy, and a purse of $3,000 back in 1901. $3,000 is still a pretty nice sum. So back then, you can imagine how much that was really worth. And again, they also brought in special attractions for that fair. And again, they piggybacked off the Pan American Exposition this time, which was held in Buffalo, New York. Okay, so not all fair advertising was pre-printed, but some here, used something like a poster stamp to spread the word. Here, the Mauser Mill Company, they stuck one of these on the back for the 1921 fair. And this is the only cover I've found where there's actually a poster stamp or Cinderella in use. All the other ones I've had are just loose. And so here are a few more examples of poster stamps or Cinderellas advertising the Allentown Fair. They seem to come around from the mid-19-teens to the 1920s. The ones here on the top you see are from the 1916 fair. And then the bottom 6, they're a full set of 6 for the 1919 fair. Again, I haven't encountered on any of these used on cover yet. At the time I put these slides together, I only had 4 of the 1916s, and till today I found a 5th one. So still making some progress. Okay, and so here are the rest of the poster stamps that I've encountered. 1920 through 26, and also the 100th anniversary in 1952. The 20 and 21 show the view from the grandstands and all the action. 1922, that shows again the logo of the Agricultural Society we talked about. A little more simple in 1923, 24, 26, simple design. In 1925, on the top right, I think that one's kind of interesting because the premium list has that same artwork. It's a bold yellow with the black outlines. And again, bottom right corner, that's the 100th anniversary. So a lot of materials for the 100th anniversary. Okay, so as you can see here, the tradition of Allentown Fair advertising covers continued strong, at least through 1940. And each of these are all personalized to different businesses. They would print below the Allentown Fair box. Okay, so advertising was, oops. Oh, okay, sorry about that. So businesses also produce their own postcards to announce the Allentown Fair and their presence at the event. This one is a very rare one by the American Sawmill Machinery Company. And vendors would, come and announce to existing potential customers that they'd be having a display at the fair. They put on some quite elaborate setups of farm machinery and various other products, because they were pulling in crowds of tens of thousands, back that many years ago. That was quite a good business opportunity. All right, so now advertising was one thing, but the growing crowds at the Allentown Fair needed to be wowed. So with each year, the LCAS needed to do lots of planning to book first-rate events, always trying to top the past year. And the next several slides will give you a sense of some of these big acts over the years. By 1900, the crowds were demanding premier horse racing. That was what they wanted. Names like Prince Alert, Little Boy, Sweet Marie, Cressius, and especially the famous Dan Patch, who you see on this postcard. Here you see him in front of the old wooden grandstand, which was on the fairgrounds from 1889, which seated 2,500, and then it was later enlarged about 5 years later. And here we see another example of famous racehorses at the fair. Here you see this was a matchup between Cressius and Dan Patch. It's 1905. Okay. So here's another example of some famous trotters at the Great Allentown Fair, but this time we're outside of the postcard format. As it says here, the entertainment opportunities in the late 1800s and early 1900s were pretty limited. So these were big events, and so they were deemed worthy of photographs, which were kind of expensive at the time. But back in the day, it was typically very tiny little photographs was all you would get. But this one shows Peerless Gent and his driver. He was the winner at the 1908 fair. And this is not a reproduction, this is an actual photo from then, 20 by 16, which is, I've not seen anything of that size since. Let's see. So let's see. So by the 1920s, the crowds were again demanding something new to supplement their horse races. The LCAS responded by providing a dedicated day for automobile racing. This was typically on a Saturday at the end of the fair. And this also shows you how panoramic photos became very popular from the 19-teens through the 40s to capture all these crowd and event scenes, and oftentimes with a full grandstand in the background. So this one shows some of the early automobile racing at the 1928 fair. So if you're having all these events, you're going to need some programs and souvenirs. They typically accompany these events, and those type of materials are another important aspect of my collection to try to get a good sense of what was going on. And as it says here, the LCAS was trying to broaden the fair's appeal beyond just agriculture and horse racing. They added in the automobiles, which, and they just kept trying to add to their repertoire. The horse racing started around 1901-ish and continued. I have a program from 1975. I think that was about the last year. And as we said, many world famous horses participated. And then the auto races started around the 1920s. But Demolition Derby, that still goes on to this day. Oh, I should have mentioned, oops, ahead of myself. Oh, so after the horse racing and the auto racing were pretty much past, they turned towards big name entertainment. So they had lots of performances from big stars like Johnny Carson, Sonny and Cher, the Beach Boys, Carrie Underwood, just to name a few, and that focus continues to today. So as technology advanced, the LCAS was also able to bring some new marvels to amaze the crowds, including some daredevil flyers. So here you see some of the types of airships that were brought around for the 1909 fair. And this shows some of the schematics of those ships. And what's kind of interesting, it's not shown here, but I do have an actual photograph of one of these airships. I think they said it was Lincoln Beachy was the one who was flying it, and someone in the crowd in the grandstand took a picture, and so it showed up many years later. So the following year, 1910, the dirigibles were replaced by an early airplane, this time piloted by one of the early pioneers of flight, Glenn Curtiss. So here you can see a postcard at left commemorating that. And then somewhere around 1910, someone had the idea to adorn one of the kind of more common Midway postcards. But they said, hey, let's throw a Beachy type or a Curtiss type plane on there. So when you got to the big day for the fair, you better not forget your ticket. From the earliest days, you had to have an admission ticket to the fair. Early tickets are quite rare because most were discarded. They started out kind of simple, but they got increasingly elaborate, especially in the early 1900s. And examples that are here were from 1869 to 1880. And most of these were season ticket holders for Agricultural Society members or life members. Okay, so once inside the fair, you better expect to have some fun. From the earliest days, rides and other attractions such as vaudeville performances line the midway. This is a really rare real picture postcard from the 1908 fair, and it shows the crowds all dressed up, walking along the midway looking to have a good time. So the fairgoers, they like to try some new things, but they also like to admire the familiar. So here at left, you see real picture postcard of two ladies posing with an early automobile. It's probably 1910 to 1915. This was the days of the horse and buggy, so hardly anybody had a car. So that was quite a novelty. And I think it's safe to say that fewer ladies were driving those cars. So this made for a fun little souvenir to take with you. And then at right, you see a 1940s family looking at some of the Grange exhibits. And to this day, you get 3 or 4 of those type of large exhibits that they really put a lot of work into. Okay, so prize ribbons. So prize ribbons and cash premiums are still awarded to this day as a way to encourage public participation and exhibition at the fair. And most of the winning entries receive small, single cut ribbons. But for the large major categories, like, if you have the reserve champion hog or the grand champion bull, you get a large rosette type ribbon such as these. Now, these are from the 1940s. And as mentioned here, for collectors such as me, it was a sad day when the LCAS stopped putting the dates on the ribbons after 1979. I guess they figured they had leftover ribbons, they could use them the next year, but we lose a little bit of historical perspective that way. Okay. So really great entries or exhibits could sometimes garner more than just a ribbon. So over the years, the LCAS awarded quite a lot of trophies, sometimes with very detailed, very detailed category designations on there, which make you laugh a little bit. They're really popular in the early 1900s through about 1920, but if you see a couple on the right there, they were still giving them in recent years for things like singing competitions or one for the horse races. All right, so once you're inside the fairgrounds, you could also expect to pick up a souvenir or two from local merchants. So here you see a pretty rare anti-Pepsia trade card from 1904. It shows the horticultural hall that was torn down somewhere along the way. Still got to research that one. But the hawkers would pass out these souvenir cards, and they might also have had a stand where you could sample their products or they could sell it to you. But just something to keep you keep them in your mind as you're enjoying the fair when you go home. Okay, so a few more examples of souvenir postcards passed out at the fair. One from Graham showing some farm engines and machinery, and then another one from a Quo Vadis cigar company. So now, not all souvenirs were free though, but you had to remember that a great event like the Allentown Fair, people were typically willing to part with a little bit of their hard-earned money once a year. So traveling vendors, they were only too happy to help fill this need. And the next few slides give you an idea of some of the types of trinkets that were available. So here's a couple examples of the ruby glass, which was popular from the 1890s through around 1920. And this could be inscribed with the name and date of the event, and you could even have it personalized, with your individual name. So, common examples are cups, glasses, creamers, shot glasses, but these are a couple of the more elaborate ones. This is a covered dish and then a lemonade kind of set. But since they were bigger and more elaborate, presumably they were more expensive, and you're probably going to see a lot fewer of these type floating around. Okay, green glass, much the same as the ruby counterpart, same types of pieces, showing a few more common ones, some creamers, and cold bucket on the left, and then one of the more rare covered dish type ones on the right. And there's also like a milky custard kind of glass, similar type of thing, same time period, but unfortunately that one didn't make the cut. Milk glass shows you all the different kinds of odd shapes and sizes that would come in. This seemed to be limited to, this vendor must have been there just for a couple years, 1924, 25. That's all the pieces I seem to find. Fewer undated, but what you see in the photo, that just shows the odd variety. And I think the 1924 frying pan is probably my favorite. Plates, it's another popular form of memorabilia from around 1900 and 1930. And they usually like to have some interesting subject matter. The grandstand was always popular. Some of the famous racehorses, damn patches in there. And patriotic themes were also popular, or the 50th anniversary of the fair is shown there. And they would also cheat and like steal images from postcards and transfer them onto these kind of plates and other memorabilia. Buttons, pins, badges, watch fobs. These are all inexpensive little souvenirs that, especially a kid might like to have if they bug their parent enough. Sometimes they had events like the Spanish-American War heroes were in there, the semi-centennial fair, again, some of the famous racehorses you can see. Kind of an interesting mix, I think. Ribbons, very similar to the buttons, other popular items. The ones here range from 1901 to about 1914. I think these are kind of cool wooden souvenirs. These seem to range, I have them from about 1901 to 1906. The little paddle there, that one's from 1922, a little later, certainly a different vendor. But I like these because they were fashioned right from the tree limbs, and you can see the bark retained on the edges. So, you know, things like inkwells, there's inkwell jars, tankards, wishing wells. Shell souvenirs, who would have thought? They seem to go from the late 1890s to about 1911 is the latest I've seen. Sometimes they just use some glitter lettering right on the shell, but some of the older ones have more intricate work done to fashion them into things like ships, or I've seen a 1910 where it was the early plane, you know, the Curtiss type plane. And so they probably knew he was coming to the fair, so they made souvenirs to go with that. Pressed aluminum, these are from 1915 or so. Cups, trays, salt and pepper shakers, toothpick holders. Sometimes they have Allentown Fair, Great Allentown Fair etched on them. Sometimes a little color is added or retained if you're lucky. And of course, pennants. That's another super popular, one of the quintessential fair type souvenirs that the kids always wanted. So here you see many times they were dated. And the one in the top right corner, that's actually shrunk down. That pennant is probably about 3 feet across and in perfect condition. Okay, so as said, you know, success breeds success. And by 1912, the Great Allentown Fair got a huge new brick and steel grandstand that could seat 10,000. And that's the grandstand that stands there to this day. So it was ready in time for the 1912 fair, cost $100,000, which back in 1912 was a whole lot of money. And at the right, I really love this real picture postcard. It shows the old judges stand that went with the grandstand when it was constructed around 1912. Unfortunately, that judges stand was demolished somewhere along the way. You know, again, a blow to history buffs like me. Okay, so if I haven't convinced you yet that the Allentown Fair was a pretty big deal, don't just take my word for it. In addition to the famous entertainers that I alluded to earlier, the fair also caught the attention of quite a number of important public figures. So at left, you can see the morning call announcing everyone that General MacArthur and his family were coming to the fair in 1951. And in 1965, the head of the Lehigh County Agricultural Society, he was also head of the International Association of Fairs and Expositions. Well, for his good works, he managed to get a letter from President Johnson. So, and kind of an interesting story, when I was able to acquire that stock share, old stock share you saw early in the presentation, when I was taking it out of the old frame to try to get it, you know, reframed nicely, what was hidden in the back of the framing? The letter from President Johnson. So that was kind of a neat bonus. So with that history, you know, I'm pleased to report that the Allentown Fair is still going strong to this day, and very happy that it returned in 2021. Albeit with a bit of a shortened run. You know, it had a little bit with the COVID, and we also had a tropical storm hit us once again. But for the days it was dry, it was a kind of a big success. So now quickly for the military history buffs, I'd like to just share a few slides to discuss what was going on at the fairgrounds in 1917-18. 2 of the years when there was no fair. So, as I mentioned, the fairgrounds was turned over to the federal government to serve as the Camp Crane for the U.S. Army Ambulance Corps. They got a nice little bit of rent from the government, and the society turned the fairgrounds over June 9th, 1917. And E.E. Persons was the Camp Crane commandant. They sent their first 20 sections of troops to France, August 7th, 1917. They arrived a couple weeks later, and several thousand more patriotic soldiers eventually followed. And finally, the camp closed April 10th, 1919. And as an aside, I thought I would just note how the Spanish flu was raging during the camp's operation. It's how appropriate thing to mention with everything that's going on today. But through military discipline and some strong mitigation measures, the camp and the soldiers actually fared a lot better than the general population. So here we see a rooster patch. This was the type worn by the troops being sent to France. And then there was a lion patch, similar, sent for the troops to Italy. As you can see here, most of the troops out of Camp Crane went to France, 95 sections versus 22 to Italy. Here you see Colonel Persons, the camp commandant that I mentioned. And in these early, you can see the discussion at the bottom. Some of the early postcards said Camp Persons instead of Camp Crane, and they're typically blackened out. But this is one of the ones that managed to somehow escape that editing process. Okay, so here we see a couple of cards showing the soldiers doing their duties at the camp. Just on the left, you see them marching and displaying the colors. They did a lot of marching, from what I understand. And sometimes they said that the camp was so full of soldiers, they couldn't really even house them all there. And they would send them out on field duty into with their tents into the countryside around Allentown, because there wasn't room for them all in the camp. And it shows you some of the line of ambulances. That was their big mission, was having these ambulances manned. Quickly, a very unusual postcard. So this is shows the soldiers of Base Hospital 117 at the camp in April 1918. And this is they obviously took a photo of a couple of these panoramic photos, these large ones, and shrunk it down to this size, not quite 9 inches by 3 inches. Really tiny for a panoramic, but very big for a postcard. But I found this recently. It's the only one I've ever seen. Okay. So this slide shows kind of some of the reality of what the soldiers had to be prepared for in World War I. So this shows a couple of the soldiers in their training in their full gas mask regalia, which reflects the heavy use of mustard gas in World War I. And in the card, the soldier says, "No, I'm not across, but may go yet, but rather think I'll be home soon." And if you look at the date, November 25th, 1918, I think the war was pretty much over at that point. I think you were after the armistice even at that point. So here's an interesting non-philatelic piece related to Camp Crane, which I think fills in an interesting tidbit of history. I never realized, but President Taft, former President Taft, visited the camp March 14th, 1918. Looks like it was in conjunction with a Big Brothers program. And this must have been, I guess, your admission pass. So it looks like a tag like you would dangle from your rearview mirror on your car. But it probably boosted the morale of the troops to have such an important visitor. And this was at a time after Taft was president, but before he became Chief Justice. So he was just a private citizen, being a law professor at Yale in those intervening years. Another non-philatelic piece shows a little more history. The gentleman in the center, April 1918, he is the governor of Pennsylvania, came to visit the camp. So he and all the dignitaries there assembled for a photo, all the, senior officers. And you can see the camp mascot off to the left, bear cub mascot. And a couple of interesting postcards to shows that not all the camp occupants were human. Got some dogs, trained German shepherds to go into service. And it also shows that not all time was spent working. The Camp Crane had a baseball team, they had a football team. Okay, another non-human resident of the camp. Again, there's the bear. He was the mascot of the main section of the camp. And as it says in the card, he's a dandy mascot, eats all the blankets he can get a hold of. Okay, so again, the Camp Crane was more than just a military installation. It was really home to these young men, about 6,000 at any one time. And so when they weren't training, they were doing sporting activities, trying to do entertainment, community service type activities. And so here you see a souvenir program. They did some variety show, and they would invite in, people from the community to watch the show, and local businesses would sponsor it. Okay, so this is a philatelic piece, which actually shows where many of the other philatelic pieces were generated. This was the YMCA camp, the YMCA tent at the camp, and they would pass out envelopes and stationery for the soldiers to write to their loved ones at home. And the next few slides just show some examples of some of the covers and correspondence coming out of Camp Crane. Again, these are pretty hard to come by. This one is kind of interesting. It's a flag cover, but it's the only one I've seen with a special delivery postage on it. Here's some from the Camp Crane Officers Club. So obviously they were providing envelopes and matching stationery to the officers. This shows an example of the Our Town series from the World War I era. So they were, pretty commonly sold. This one didn't originate from the camp. Some lady is just writing to some friend of hers, but could have come similar ones could have come from the camp. Okay, so, and although not as common or available as the fair souvenirs, Camp Crane did inspire a bit of memorabilia of its own. Here's a pillow cover that shows one of the types of things for sale at the camp that you could send home to friends or family to keep them thinking of you. And then after Camp Crane closed, the brave men came home from Europe, and their honorable service was not forgotten. So here we see a 30th and a 35th anniversary cover of the camp, its founding. And finally, let's see, there's some reunion buttons that, the times spent at the camp forged some strong bonds. And the very next year after the camp closed, they had their first reunion in 1920. And so they all got buttons when they attended. And then this practice went on for quite a few years, these reunions, but not surprisingly, as they started to pass from the scene, the numbers dwindled, and the last reunion badge that I've come across is 1966. So I'll have to research more, how long they kept it going. And so with that, we have reached the end, and I appreciate having had the opportunity to share with you just a small portion of the history of the Great Allentown Fair and Camp Crane. If you have any leads on items, both philatelic and non-philatelic, to add to my collection, I would really appreciate it. With each piece, I continue to add to the mosaic of our local understanding of our local history of Pennsylvania, and someday I really hope to help the Lehigh County Agricultural Society establish a little museum so that people can really appreciate their rich history. So thank you again, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have to the extent I'm able to.
So, well, thank you, Eric. I met Eric out at the Great American Stamp Show in Chicago. We only talked for about 15 minutes, and he told me he was into the Allentown Fair. I had no idea. He's really into it. So this is really awesome. Does anybody have any questions or possibly any material that you might have in your collections or something to discuss?
I have a question, Eric. I believe Ernest Hemingway was an ambulance driver in Italy in the First World War. Do you know if he went through Camp Crane?
I'm not sure that he went through Camp Crane, but there was another famous author who I know did. I think his name's like Dos Passos or something like that. And he definitely went through. I don't think Hemingway did.
Okay, thanks. By the way, my wife's office is exactly 1 block away from the fairgrounds in Allentown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have to put chains across their parking area when the fair is on to prevent people parking there.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's parking's at a premium always.
Yes.
So the nice thing is they finally removed that ugly chain link fence all around the fairgrounds, and they put up a nice black steel fence, and they put brick columns with lights now. They raised some funds, and they also got a matching grant from the Pennsylvania Agricultural Department. So
great. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the fairgrounds, there's a farmers market held under the grandstands every week, I think from Thursday to Saturday. And it's a big part of the farm community here, still using the fairgrounds for selling their products.
That's kind of awesome. So what kind of attendance do they have now? Are you familiar with that, Eric? I mean, I saw the one where it said 57,000, like 100 years ago. I mean,
yeah. Well, it typically the duration of the fair typically ranges from like 5 to 7 days over the years. It kind of fluctuated, and it was at different time periods. It used to be about the 3rd week of September, because it was more in tune with the harvesting times, but then agriculture became less and less of a focus in the area as industry and other pursuits became more popular. And so they started thinking, well, when can we get better attendance? At one point they shifted it into August. I don't know if that was just a little too hot for everybody, but the school kids were, but in the end, in recent years, they settled on a week ending on Labor Day always. So in recent years, any time, it's always till up through Labor Day. It shifts because Labor Day shifts. But I think they probably get a couple 100,000 over the course of a week, maybe.
Wow.
And again, it depends on the weather. We often seem to end up getting a tropical storm, and it just waits for that fair week. But sometimes we get lucky.
Awesome.
Hey, Eric, this is Paul Pitcher from Berks County. Just a couple of comments. on your 1859 $10 stock certificate, in today's dollars, that'd be about $400. And thinking about the 1901 purse on the horse race of $3,000, in today's money, that's about $100,000.
Wow.
So really big deals there, of course. And then finally on the 1912 grandstand, in today's dollars, that would be about $3 million. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a really big deal. And then the only other comment I have is on Glenn Curtis. So in August 1909, he won really what was the first large air competition in Reims, France, won the Gordon Bennett Cup. So he was truly a world celebrity in 1910 and probably the most famous person in aviation at that time. So again, really lends some credence to the significance of the Allentown Fair.
Neat. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm curious. You said you grew up in the area around Allentown. Whereabouts did you grow up?
So I grew up in Macungie, and
Okay.
I went to Emmaus High School. And and then all my family pretty much still lives in the area. So I get up there, quite a bit, not only to see the family, but I keep going hunting for my stuff here. I was up last weekend, found a couple little items, nothing too spectacular, but I'll take what I can get. And then of course I like to go eat your hoagies and your Yakko's hot dogs too. So I can't stay away too much.
Speaking of hoagies, just a total aside. When they opened the first Wawa in Florida, about 3 or 4 years ago, there were people traveling over 250 to 300 miles to get a hoagie at the first Wawa in Florida. So the people who love their hoagies will go the distance for them.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm a fan of Lee's Hoagies on Lehigh Street. So if you haven't tried that one, that's my recommendation.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Eric, this is Rick Leiby. That 1862 period when the fairgrounds was shut down, was because the 176th Pennsylvania was rendezvoused there. And they had 7 companies out of Lehigh County and 3 out of Monroe. And by November, they were gone. So it probably was the period when, probably from August to November. So it shut down the fair in its typical time frame. But so you should be out looking for 176th Pennsylvania Regiment covers to see if you can get one from, from the fairgrounds.
Wow, that's interesting. If you can email me any information on that, I'd love that background because I haven't come across that.
Sure, I can.
That would be great.
Yep.
We'll help you dig deeper into this hole. Don't worry. Come up with a lot of ideas. And one thing, just for everybody too, I have I know you've heard me mention about this Bubble Up site that I use. I have a ton of resources on all the counties of Pennsylvania, in addition to a whole lot of other. I have probably 15 gigabytes of material up there, just tremendous amount of stuff. So if you're looking to do research, a lot of it I got from Google Books, but instead of having to go search through all that stuff, have it in one place. I'd be happy to share that with anybody that would, like to do that. It's kind of like Dropbox or one of those kind of file sharing places, and it's safe and it's free and, no charge for anything.
Yeah, I would have to say that one of the best things about this hobby, unlike just general stamp collecting or coin collecting or something where you see the catalog and how many were produced, or this hobby has always given me surprises. You just have until something shows up, you have no idea that it's out there, and kind of makes your day when you find something new and unusual
Do you know of anybody else that's doing what you're doing to this kind of level? It's kind of neat to share, you know?
I think there's a few other collectors up in that area. You know, some older gentlemen, just a few, you know, but I think a lot of it is sort of stays in the family. And, you know, sometimes when it comes to light, to me, it's like one item or two items because it was something where people didn't have a big connection, you know, connection to it, or it had traveled outside the area and it lost its relevance to people who had it. But you know, I just have to be persistent. But I have to show you one thing. This showed up in the mail today, this cover, and one of the postcard shots that got cut when the presentation was too long showed one of the famous, you know, Dan, I think it's probably Dan Patch postcard, but in the corner was a drawing of this man who's Jeremiah Roth, and he was one of the most famous presidents of the Agricultural Society, probably from the 1880s or 1890s. So obviously he was a gentleman farmer too. And I just happened to come across a cover with cows, pigs, and chickens, says Jeremiah Roth, dealers in cattle, hogs, and sheep, Allentown, PA. And how appropriate that it showed up in the mail today, right in time for the presentation. So you never know what you're going to find. And I had to grab it because for 22 years, I never saw it, and I probably won't see it for another 22.
Well, we all love when the mailman comes and we get these little tidbits of things to add to our collections. So just to divert just a little bit, I want to make a shameless plug also. I'm developing a presentation on Eli Beatty. He was the cashier of the Hagerstown Bank for about 50 years, 1807 to 1859. They're very prolific. A lot of collectors have them. If any of you guys have anything that you would like to have as part of the presentation and like to share with me, I'm up over 200 covers now. I thought I had a lot, you know, it's like, that's why I was asking about other collectors out there. I probably have somewhere around 100 covers or so. Well, I met a guy last week from California. He did an exhibit actually in 2010. He has about 550 covers. And I met another guy who has 225. So it doesn't matter. 40 years I've been doing this and I'm still the new guy. I don't know how this works out. You know, you think you are starting to make a mark and you find out there's so much more out there. So anyway, I'm doing a pretty in-depth research on that Hagerstown Bank and all the banks from most of them were from Pennsylvania. There were a lot of Maryland banks, Virginia, West Virginia, that sent things to this Hagerstown Bank. So if you guys come across anything, I would appreciate that. Anybody else? Go ahead, Sid.
I really would like to thank you for that download you've been making. I've already made significant use of some of the things
Awesome.
you had on your website. I was trying to do some research on some War of 1812 officers' mail.
Right.
And I found the registry that you had on the website
Great.
was invaluable for that purpose.
Yeah, there's some Army and Navy magazine, you know, magazines are devoted to that. There's the military academies, everybody that's ever graduated from military academies and their background. Tons of, thank you for the testimony, because I love that people would go there and use it. Hopefully it'll make research a little bit easier. And I find myself, it's just like getting on the internet. I look up and it's like 3 hours later. I'm like, what am I'm getting so knee deep into this stuff, but it's a great research place. And that's the fun part of this hobby for me anyway. So it's learning about it. So thanks, Ed. And if you ever need anything in particular you're looking for, let me help look for it and I'll help you find it, because I've looked at a lot of different places to get stuff to put in there. So I'd be happy to share those too. Awesome. Thank you.
Eric, a terrific presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. We appreciate it. And we'll share. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, when did you start at DOE?
June of 2007.
Oh, I retired a year from DOE a year earlier than that.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
Okay. Did you know, by any chance, did you know Autumn Secret?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
Oh, okay. My friend's father was, he worked there and retired about a year before I got there, or not even a year. Right.
It was an interesting place to be there. I was on the 6th floor looking out towards the Pentagon on September 11th. You can
Oh,
see the smoke and everything coming up
oh
from the Pentagon.
gosh. Oh. Yeah, I started at transportation in 2002. So I'm working on 20 years in the government, but yeah, goes fast.
Yeah, sure does.
Okay, well,
So I'm
thanks.
looking forward to someday having more time to work on these hobbies and
Yeah.
leave
Well,
some of that work behind.
Well, I will share this. I'll share the video from tonight. I'll edit it down, of course, some of this last stuff we've done at the end here, but that'll be available. And then we'll do the long presentation in the PowerPoint for people that want to look in even more detail. And then I'll have this video. So I'll share that with everybody. And again, I apologize for the mix up on the links. That's totally my fault. But hopefully I won't do that next time. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, and look forward to doing this again.
All
Have a
right.
great night,
Thank you
everybody.
again.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Steve and
Thanks.
Eric. Many thanks.